You have probably walked over one without ever looking down. On a busy street corner, pressed flat into the asphalt, about the size of a license plate, there is a message. It has appeared in more than 20 cities. It has been showing up for over 40 years. And in 4 short lines, it tells you something impossible. Toynbee idea. In movie 2001, Resurrect Dead on planet Jupiter. Nobody signed it. Nobody claimed it. And for 4 decades, nobody could figure out who was putting them there or how. Start with the message itself, because every word is a clue. Toynbee was a real man. Arnold Toynbee, a famous British historian who once wrote about a strange idea that maybe through sheer force of will, the dead could be brought back to life. The movie 2001 is Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece, 2001: A Space Odyssey. It ends with a man traveling to Jupiter and being reborn as a new kind of being. Whoever made these tiles took those 2 ideas, a historian's thought about resurrection and a film about rebirth near Jupiter, and fused them into a single plan. Bring back the dead, colonize the planet Jupiter with them, and tell the world, one tile at a time. Here is where it gets genuinely strange. How do you get a message permanently embedded in the middle of a busy road, at a red light, without anyone ever seeing you do it? The answer is quietly brilliant. The tiler never used cement. He cut his message from layers of floor linoleum and tar. Then he wrapped the whole thing in black tar paper and simply dropped it on the road in the dark. That is it. Then he walked away and let the city do the rest. Over days and weeks, thousands of car tires rolled over the packet, pressing it down into the warm asphalt. The tar paper wrapper slowly wore away, and the message rose to the surface on its own, fused into the street, as if it had grown there. So the how was clever, but the where made no sense at all. The tiles were not just in one city. They appeared in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Washington, New York, Boston, Cleveland, St. Louis, more than 20 American cities in total, hundreds of tiles. And then investigators found something that broke the whole picture. Tiles turned up in South America, in Santiago, Chile, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, thousands of miles away, across an entire hemisphere. How does one anonymous man, working alone in the dark, reach 2 continents? Nobody has ever answered that. It is still one of the strangest parts of the case. The first real clue to who was behind it came in 1983. A newspaper columnist in Philadelphia wrote a short story about a local man. The man had been contacting reporters, pushing a bizarre idea. He wanted to colonize the planet Jupiter with the resurrected dead. He had even given his group a name. The man's name, according to the article, was James Morasco. It was the exact idea on the tiles, from a real, named person. It looked like the case was solved before it even began, but it was not. Because when investigators dug into James Morasco years later, the trail fell apart in their hands. The man they found, named James Morasco, was elderly, in his 80s, and did not match. When a reporter once called his home, a woman there said her husband had never even heard of the Toynbee idea. When Morasco died in 2003, at the age of 87, the tiles kept appearing. He was not the tiler. The most promising lead had led nowhere, and for 20 years, the mystery just sat there in the streets, being paved over, worn down, and quietly replaced by new tiles, while the man behind it stayed completely invisible. Then in 2005, 3 men from Philadelphia decided they would not let it go. An artist named Justin Duerre and 2 friends became obsessed with finding the tiler. They photographed hundreds of tiles, they mapped where they appeared, and they made a crucial discovery. In one Philadelphia neighborhood, they found what looked like the tiler's earliest experiments, rough, practice tiles, clustered in one small area. If the first tiles were made there, then somewhere in that neighborhood, the man who started it all had once lived. They were closing in. As they narrowed the search, a portrait began to form. The prime suspect was a reclusive man who lived alone in that neighborhood, almost never seen by anyone. And then came the detail that made everyone's skin crawl. Neighbors described his car. It supposedly had no passenger seat and a hole cut into the floor. Think about what that means. He could drive slowly over an intersection, wait for a red light, and drop a tile straight down through the floor of his own moving car, onto the road, without ever opening a door, without ever being seen. He was a ghost in traffic, planting his message under the wheels of the entire city. There was more. Buried in some of the tiles were longer, rambling messages, not about resurrection anymore, but about a vast conspiracy. The man believed the government, the press, and powerful people were all working together to silence him and bury his idea. The writing grew paranoid, and at times full of hate. And hidden inside, it was another clue, references to shortwave radio and to the city of Detroit. It seems that long before he ever cut a tile, this man had been broadcasting his idea over the airwaves, a lonely voice on the radio in the middle of the night, convinced the whole world was against him, and that only he knew the truth about the dead and the planet Jupiter. Stop and think about what this actually asks of a person. Not to believe a strange idea, plenty of people believe strange things, but to spend 40 years of your life alone, cutting messages out of linoleum by hand and sneaking them onto roads in the dark so that strangers 100 years from now might read them and understand. Some of the tiles were not messages to the public at all. They were instructions. They told the reader, in plain words, to make their own tiles and to glue them down too. He was not just spreading an idea. He was trying to recruit. He wanted an army of tilers, carrying his message across the world long after he was gone, so that when the day came, humanity would be ready to bring back its dead. That is not a prank. That is a man who believed he had been trusted with saving everyone, and that no one would listen. In 2011, the three investigators turned their hunt into a documentary. It premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, and it won an award for its director. After decades, they had a name, a neighborhood, a car, a method, and a motive. They had, as much as anyone ever had, solved the mystery of the Toynbee Tiles. And then they did something surprising. They found the house. They walked up to the door, and they knocked. But the man they believed had spent 40 years planting messages in the streets never answered. They mailed him a letter. Nothing came back. Out of respect, they finally left him alone. The case was solved, and yet the one person who could confirm it never said a single word. There is one more thread, and it reaches into places you would not expect. The idea on the tiles did not stay on the streets. A famous science fiction writer, Ray Bradbury, wrote a story about believing in an impossible future so hard that you force it to come true. A playwright named David Mamet wrote a short play about a man calling a radio show in the middle of the night, pitching the exact idea, resurrect the dead, on the planet Jupiter, using the movie 2001. That play was written before most people had ever heard of the tiles, which means the tiler had been out there for years before he ever touched a road, calling into the night on talk radio and shortwave, a voice most people dismissed as a crank. The tiles were his second attempt. When the world would not listen to his voice, he wrote his message into the ground itself, where it could not be hung up on, or turned off, or ignored. But there is a quiet tragedy running underneath all of this. The tiles are disappearing. Some cities treat them as vandalism and scrape them out. Road crews repave over them without a second thought. Rain, salt, and 4 decades of traffic slowly grind them into nothing. The very method that made them so clever, letting the street install them, also means the street is always erasing them. For years, a small group of people have raced around with cameras, trying to photograph every tile before it vanishes for good. They are not trying to stop the tiler. They are trying to save his message. The strange life's work of a man who may never have wanted them to know his name. Because once a tile is gone, it is gone. And with it, one more piece of the only thing he ever left behind. And here is the part that stays with you. For the men who hunted him, this stopped being a puzzle and became personal. Justin Duerre, the artist who led the search, gave years of his life to it. He was chasing a stranger he had never met, trying to understand a mind most people would just call broken. But the more he learned, the more he saw something else, a person in real pain, ignored by everyone, who had turned his whole existence into one desperate message, pressed into the ground where it could never be silenced. In the end, the hunt was not really about resurrecting the dead on Jupiter. It was about a man who refused to disappear, and maybe that is the ending this story was always going to have, because the tiles never really stopped. Even after the suspected tiler went silent, new ones kept appearing. Fresh tiles in new cities, tiles in a different style, on highways, copycats inspired by the legend, a successor carrying on the work, or the original still out there, still dropping his message through the floor of a car in the dark. Nobody knows. So the next time you are standing at a crosswalk, waiting for the light, look down. You might be standing on 4 lines that somebody risked everything to leave for you. A message about resurrecting the dead on the planet Jupiter from a man who spent 40 years making sure you would never know his name.